I offer my most loving pranams at the Divine Lotus feet for most beloved Swami. Brothers and sisters, Sairam to all of you. By Swami's divine grace, today we have Dr. Valluvan Jeevanandam, who has flown in from Chicago to be with us this weekend and share Swami's divine love with all of us. Dr. Jeevanandam serves as the Chief of Cardiothoracic and Heart Transplant at the University of Chicago's Medicine and Biological Sciences Division. He's a surgeon who has perhaps performed more heart transplants than any other, I believe over 1,000 or so. He's also a pioneer in CardioVAD, a mechanical assist device for patients who are not candidates of heart transplant. But what brings him here today is none of these. It is more his spiritual wisdom and the great divine guidance that Swami showered on him that brings him here today. He went on many tours to the super specialty hospital to serve there in Puttaparthi and Whitefield. And Swami, through many interactions, blessed him with a lot of guidance. While he was busy doing what he does best, transplanting hearts, our beloved Swami was busy doing what he does best, transforming his heart. And he's here to narrate that inspiring journey of transformation. I request you to join me in giving a very loving welcome to Dr. Valluvan Jeevanandam.
Humblest pranams at the Divine Lotus feet of Swami. Respected elders, beloved brothers, sisters, and children, Sairam. It's really want to thank Sundar for doing all the work of getting me here. Sundar was, Swami says everybody's his instrument. So Sundar certainly was Swami's instrument in getting me here. He gave me so many dates and it works out. And, Swami works in very mysterious ways. We always say that. So just so happened, I happen to have another meeting and then another meeting on Saturday, Monday, and I fit this in the middle and everything works out, right? So you can think about things and nothing will happen. And then when Swami make something happen, then everything goes so smoothly. So we really want to keep this as interactive as possible. We'll do this very, very informally. So if you have any questions, I always, when I give my lectures, I always say that the worst question in the world is the one that's never asked. So if you want to just interrupt me in the middle, I'm not a learned Vedic scholar. I'm not going to come in, spring out in bhajans. If I do, Swami will probably just run out of this room. So I'm just, when he said that Swami's been transforming me and in terms of my spirituality, just remember that 20 years ago, I was the anti-spiritual person. So Swami's had to do a lot of work in the last 20 years to get me to where I am. I think, one of the real things that struck me this time, I was just in Patti in September, and one of the things that really struck me was how blessed we are that we have lived here and we know about an avatar, right? It's God. And, we read a lot about Jesus Christ, about Jesus Christ, right? But imagine actually living in the time of Jesus Christ and knowing about Jesus Christ, right? That's how we've known about Swami. I've had the absolute blessing of actually having met him and talked to him and touching him. And we all know about that. So it's a transition period because now he's not here physically. I mean, he's certainly here in every other way, but he's just not here physically. And we have to come to that period. And, somebody asked me, well, why did Swami come down here physically? What did it mean for me for Swami to come down here physically? And I could tell you, for years my mom would force me to come to the temple, right? You come to the temple, you see a God. In essence, it's a piece of rock, and you pray to God. And there's no way I would have changed to the way I am, and I still have a long way to go. But, with Swami, he did things in a very, very subtle way. Sometimes they were dramatic, but most of the time they were just subtle. There was a little look here, a little glance here, a little touch here, just a little nudge. And he kept nudging, at least me along. And if it wasn't for somebody like Swami, there's no way I would have become spiritual. So I think, the avatar comes here for a reason, and it's come here for every single one of us for a different reason. And don't think he's not here. It's The one thing about Swami that I always felt is if I thought about Swami, whether I was in Darshan line or wherever I was, Swami would give me a message, right? So it was about the beginning of September, and I usually have been going to India now that the kids are away, they're in college and stuff. So I go in February and I go in September to Patti, and I do a week of volunteer work, and it's been going on for several years. And of course now, Swami is not here physically, and so my wife said, "Are you going to go in September?" And I said, I don't know. We'll think about it. There's been a lot of challenges at work. Didn't really have time off. And I said, you know what? If Swami wants to give me a sign, I'll give me a sign. I won't believe it. In 30 seconds, my phone goes off, right? And there's this very odd number. And I answered the phone, and it's Mr. Chakravarti. So for all you don't know, Mr. Chakravarti was like Swami's right-hand person. And many times when I go to India, I haven't had time to interact with Swami, but I've talked to Mr. Chakravarti. He's the person who always comes behind Swami. And like when they go in the car, he always used to go with Swami. So he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, Doc, when are you coming to Puttaparthi?" And I said, "Wait a minute, you've never called me. What possessed you to call me?" He said, "I just woke up this morning and I just had a feeling I needed to call you to have you come over." So that's how Swami works. He's still there. He says he's not here physically, but I've always said that Swami can read your mind. And to me, the fact that he can read my mind has probably transformed me more than anything else, because then you better be sure that your mind has pure thoughts, because Swami can read those pure thoughts. And when he was actually here, physically, he would read your thoughts and he would correct me when I was in the hall, or he would show me that he could read his thoughts. So little glimpse of divinity. It wasn't overwhelming. I know people they've seen the light and all this stuff. I've not seen any light. But very, very subtle little things, and that I'll share some of those things that have really helped transform me. So, Swami was here. When Swami was here, it was very different. You could defer to Swami, you can do all that. Now really comes the test, right? Because all of us are his instruments, and we need to really get his mission going. And actually, that's what Mr. Chakravarti was talking to me for 2 hours for. He said, now this generation is going to have all the responsibility, because we knew Swami, we knew what he wanted to do, and we are tasked to really take it to to continue on. And it's not an easy thing. It's a daunting task, but it's something that he picked people to do that, and he picked all of you because you all knew Swami. So think of that as our gift to Swami, is to continue on his mission. It's interesting, coming back to Flushing is a little bit of a homecoming for me, because in 1990 or so, when we first started to go to Swami's fold, we lived in New Milford, New Jersey, and there weren't that many Sai centers. So the first, I think, satsang we ever attended outside of Phoenix, and I'll tell you why Phoenix, was in the temple. And in the basement in the temple is where they used to have the initial centers, I think. And so even today, I thought it was in the basement of the temple. Then I had to look at the address, and I said, "Oh, it's not in the basement of the temple." So my talk today is going to be how Sai Baba is the transformer of my soul. He has said many times, he always makes fun of me. It was fantastic when he would make fun of me. He called me his coconut tree surgeon because I was so tall. And, one time he asked me, "What do you want?" And I said, "I want you, Swami." And he says, "Well, hey, when do you want me? You're so tall, I'm so small. How are you going to fit inside me?" Right? And so he's always kind of made fun. He says, he transplants hearts. He takes hearts from one person, puts it into somebody else. But I take the heart that person has and make it golden, right? So that's, of course, what Swami does. And so he's really has molded my mind. So what I'm really going to do today is just simply share my experiences. Okay, they're not very in-depth things. There are many, many times when Swami has come and helped me, guided me, etc. But more importantly, not only the sharing the experiences, but sharing you what I've learned, because that is the most important thing. When I first started giving these talks, and of course Swami sets everything up, right? You don't go ahead and give a talk unless Swami wants you to give a talk. I will show you a video of an interview with Swami. And of course, unless he wants you to have all been able to see that video, it's not going to either work or something else is going to happen, or, he knows everything. And you just have to understand that. And it takes a long time to understand that, but eventually you do. So, really, Swami came down to earth, I think, for these things. He trying to transformation. That was his mission. It was a transformation of us. And I think we all have to do him proud and actually undergo the process of being transformed. Now, each one of us is in a very different portion of the journey. Some of us have known Swami when you were born. We have people who knew Swami when he was a little, very young man, and would come to their house and would cook with them and everything. And, sometimes I listen to their stories and it's like, wow, you knew Swami when you were young. I never realized that people turn around and tell me, boy, you knew Swami when he was young, because I first met Swami in 1993. In 1993, he was only 60 years old. So, I guess in a sense, I've known Swami for a fair amount of time as well. Also remember that, we're in a continuum, right? This is not a one lifetime event. We've had 1,000 lives before. We'll have 1,000 lives to follow. And we've been blessed in this lifetime that we've been able to interact with Swami. So I think I have about an hour and 45 minutes, because I have to leave by about 4:30, 4:20, something like that. So when it comes to Swami, I can just keep talking and talking and talking. So this talk is a very flexible talk. It's like Swami's interview room. I don't know if anybody's been inside Swami's interview room. It's a very small room. It's maybe, 7 by 7. It can fit 150 people, and it can fit one person. And so it's kind of like my talk. I've extended this talk and probably tortured people for up to 8 hours, and I could also do it in half an hour. So we'll kind of do it in about an hour and 45 minutes. And I'll talk a little bit about my experiences, and then afterwards I have a video. This was really something that when I took the video, you never realize how precious it's going to be. It's Swami in 2005, and a real intimate look at what an inside interview is, and how Swami can be fun and laughing and engaging, where he's really your brother or your father, and not the divine God. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about the Mahasamadhi. I mean, it was a sad time, but it really epitomized what Swami came here. Swami's always said his message is his life. And certainly that whole process of the Mahasamadhi was a message on Swami's life. So, Swami communicates with all of us in different ways. Sometimes it's directly, sometimes via discourse. Swami could, he's given a lot of discourses. Sometimes things go in one year and out the other year. It's lovely when he gives the discourses. Nothing necessarily retains. I've probably heard about 20 Swami discourses in my entire time, and there's probably about 2 or 3 points that I really remember. And those are probably the things that he wanted me to remember, right? Because otherwise I wouldn't remember that. For other people, he comes in dreams. Honestly, I don't think I've ever had him come in a dream of mine, but a lot of times, like my dad has had him come in dreams, my mom's had him come in dreams. So again, all these things are ways Swami communicates with each one of us, because each one of you is special to Swami in trying to shape your spirituality. Sometimes he may come to you indirectly via somebody else. Like for me, he came and basically asked me to come to Puttaparthi to Mr. Chakravarti, for instance. So let me tell you what I'm asking Swami here. So Swami never really gives you direct answers, right? I mean, the only time that he's given me an absolute direct answer is in 1998. I was in Philadelphia. I was the head of heart transplant at Temple University. And, with Swami's grace, externally everything was going great. We had the busiest heart transplant in the world. We had a lot of research grants, everything. Swami would always ask me, where are you from? And, that's always a loaded question, right? Do you say you're from Parthi? Do you say I'm from you, Swami, whatever? So after a while, you just don't play the game, because whenever you play the game, you're always going to lose. So I just said, yes, I'm from Philadelphia, Swami. He said, yes. He goes, how is it in Temple? He goes, he comes from Temple, he'll say somebody else, right? And, Swami sometimes wouldn't talk directly to you. He'd talk to you about me, who's sitting there, So he said he comes from Temple. And he'll say, how's it in Temple? And I say, everything is good, Swami. And he says, no, it's not good. It's not good. I don't understand what Swami's talking about, right? I mean, from a secular point of view, everything was going well. But Swami, of course, knows things at a higher level. So in 1998, that was, I think, the only time that I went to Parthi when Swami wasn't in Parthi. He had gone to Whitefield at that time. And I had to go a little bit later. I usually go in February. This was in March. So it's really, really hot, and I went to Whitefield, and usually Swami plays games with me, right? I'm there for the entire week. He'll ignore me in the beginning, and then he may pay attention a little bit in the middle, and he'll completely play the game at the end, because he won't call me for the interview till the very last possible time. And then he always looks at me and goes, "You see, you should never be worried. I'll call you for an interview, but you're always upset." So this time in Whitefield, it's the first time he actually sent word out that he wanted to see me. So, I had to leave Putty, went to Whitefield. And just before I'd left, I'd gotten contact by University of Chicago whether I would be interested in looking at the chief position at the University of Chicago. And honestly, it's the last thing in the world I wanted to do, because we were doing very good at Temple. They had promised me they'd make me chief at some point, and I really did not. Everything was good. Life was good. We were living in a brand new house. It was in brand new development. We were living the suburban utopia, right? And you have tons of malls and everything else. Life's easy. So we go to the interview room, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so I got an interview. Now that interview at University of Chicago was weird too, because I was supposed to go to Patti in very end of February, and about 2 days before I was going to go, the chief at the University of Chicago called me up and he says, "You know what? You need to come here tomorrow to interview for this job." And I'm saying, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" I mean, I never applied for this position. And he just calls me up and says, "You got to come." I said, "I can't come tomorrow." And he says, "Oh yeah, no, just cancel your case and we'll get you whatever ticket you want. You come in the morning, just spend 4 hours with us, and we'll send you back in the evening time." And so I said, okay, fine. I mean, he is a person of high position. So I went to Chicago, and I came back, and I told Sheila, my wife, I said, it's a very prestigious institution, kind of considered the Harvard of the Midwest, but there's no way I'm going to go, because life's good here. That's Chicago's old. I always thought it was, gray and drabby. Actually, now that I live in Chicago, you understand how beautiful it is, but you don't see it. I always thought Chicago was something you stopped off going from the East Coast to the West Coast, and Chicago didn't even exist. So there I am in the interview room, and then I'm thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to bring this up with Swami, right? Does he think this is too ridiculous that I'm going to bring up? So he calls me in for the interview, and even before I could say anything, he looks at me, holds my hand, and he said, "I made the job for you in Chicago, you go." And so that's the only time that Swami has been absolutely definitive about something for me. And it was a very tough process, because every single time Chicago would offer, Philadelphia would 25% increase that offer. This was fun, going back and forth, to the point where some of my friends said, "You see, Swami wanted you to go there just so you got a better offer in Philadelphia to stay. So you don't have to go to Chicago." So eventually went to Chicago, and, it hasn't been a bed of roses. We've had ups and downs and stuff, but, Swami wanted me to go to Chicago, and I could never really figure it out. I mean, maybe it was for the kids, because they got a better education. Who knows? Swami wanted me to go, I went. So I'm talking to Swami there. At that point, I had gotten recruited to go to, there's a hospital in the Harvard system. So it's probably one of the most prestigious hospitals to get a chief position, so they had recruited me to go. So I'm asking Swami whether I should go. So I'm asking Swami whether he should go, and he looks at me, and he said, "Who sent you to Chicago?" And so I said, you sent me, Swami. So then he didn't say anything else. So again, this is Swami now not being direct, right? He's being obtuse. And I can't, he said, okay, well, that probably means Swami said he sent me to Chicago, which means I should stay in Chicago, but I couldn't be sure. So I asked him again, and he said, I asked him again, I said, Swami, should I go to Boston and stay in Chicago? And he said, I told you Chicago. Okay, so this is twice. And then one more time I asked him, just to make sure again. And he said, Chicago. And then so I sit down and I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's 3 times I asked him. I think he said stay in Chicago, but I can never really be sure. So usually when I talk, with Swami, at that time we used to stay in the darshan, that veranda for long periods of time waiting for Swami. So I always used to read a book. So I was reading one of Anil Kumar's books. And so usually what happens after I talk to Swami or something, I come back, is open the book for a page and I read a page. A lot of times Swami communicates or gives me messages just by opening a book and seeing a passage that comes in a book. So I go sit down, still confused, although even people around there said, boy, it sounds like Swami wants you to stay in Chicago. So this is the book that I was reading. As I sit down and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Swami, give me one more message. He does. He says, happiness. The third aspect of health management is to have the feeling of well-being. This is missing in a number of people, me. There are many healthy and wealthy people also in high positions but still lack a sense of well-being. He's kind of scolding me here. They move around sluggishly with a drawn face and no exuberance. What can we do for such people? If one cannot be happy here, where can one be happy? If one cannot experience bliss here, where can one have bliss? So since then, I haven't even entertained any other positions. So I figured that was the sign. So, sometimes he comes at an inner voice. So many ways how he can actually get you messages. You just have to be prepared to accept the message, and that message may not be what you want to hear. And that sometimes is even more difficult to entertain, but be open. I mean, you're going to get messages from a lot of people. And what you have to do is consider that everything that happens in your life is not coincidence, right? There are psi incidences, in that Swami has set all these things up as challenges so you can improve your spirituality and go on to the next lifetime, the next lifetime, and the lifetime after that, and continue your journey towards merging with Swami. So everything that we have, all these challenges, are really Swami's love for you to help you overcome those, because Swami won't give you a challenge that between he and you cannot overcome. So let me just tell you about the first time I actually learned about Swami. So the first time I actually ever heard about Swami was in 1980. At that time, going to India was very, very expensive, and we were not well off, so we used to go to India every 5 years. And we used to go for exactly, I think Air India allowed you at that time 120 days, so we would go for 118 or 119 days, the maximum amount of time, because it was so expensive. So we were there in 1980, and my aunt said, let's go to Kodaikanal. There's a guru there. His name is Sai Baba, and you can ask him any question you want. He'll give you the answer. And so, I grew up American at that point, right? Because I've been there. At that point, I was here for about 10 years. So we know that all these gurus are fake, that there are all these cults are out there. You had that Maharishi and all these other people who, drive around in their Rolls Royces and spend tons of money and collect all these donations. So I said, I will not spend my vacation going up to Kodaikanal to see, a guru. Well, look at that, right? I mean, at that point, there might have been 20 people there in Kodaikanal with Swami. And what a beautiful opportunity I missed. So, in Tamil, we have a saying that says, Nalla neram vandada nadakum, right? It's like, only if the time is right will it actually happen. And so clearly for me, 1980 was not the right time. And I think, what Swami was doing is allowing me to kind of grow up with the materialism, the secularity and everything of the world, right? I was earning for multiple cars and multiple houses and TVs and all the vacations, thinking maybe if I become a cardiac surgeon, I can even get a plane and all this other stuff. So, it's everybody has their own time. So that was my time of trying to come up with the dreams. And it's very interesting that the second I finished my training is that where he said, okay, party's over, now you're going to come back towards me. So I finished my training in 1991. 1989 was kind of the first time I started hearing about Swami. So how did we hear about Swami? My parents actually had moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and Phoenix, Arizona is a very, very small community of Indians at that time. Not that many. Well, there are not that many people there, period, and much fewer Indians. And so it just so happened that the Indians there were all a lot of them were Sai Baba devotees. So my mom got into Sai Baba. So, you have to understand my mom, which a lot of the kids here are going to understand as well, was somebody who told me every morning you have to get up, you have to do your puja to God, you have to pray to God before you go, and of course I'm trying to avoid this at all possible costs. You had to go to the temple at least once a month. You had to come to the temple. And we used to live in New Jersey, like coming all the way over here with the traffic to come to temple. So my mom said, there's this guru called Sai Baba, and you really should hear about him and learn about him. And so she would send me book after book after book. And, I had every excuse in the world why I couldn't read the books. So my mom would say, are you reading this? No, I did a transplant. I did this. So you just kind of get going. And then she would say, okay, come to Phoenix. So every time I went to Phoenix, she would drag me on to Sai Center in Phoenix. And the Sai Center used to have bhajans. And she said, you have to listen to bhajans. And you had to come to Sai Center. So all I can tell you is that the Sai Center there met at about 3 o'clock on Sunday. And so guess when I always used to take my ticket to fly back? 3 o'clock on Sunday, just so I would miss Sai Center. Right? Because I didn't want to go there and spend time. But my mom was persistent. She was Swami's instrument for me, or maybe I'm Swami's instrument for her. I'm not quite sure. So she would send me books and tapes and etc. And I slowly got interested in the music because one day I was, we used to have about a 40-minute commute. And I always used to put on, the sports channel, the all news all the time. And this time I had one of the tapes that were in the car. So I put the tape in, and it was a bhajan tape. And I found out that at that 45 minutes, at the end of the 45 minutes, as opposed to listening to depressing news and the same thing over and over again, when you listened to bhajan, you got out of the car, you were actually refreshed and happy. And, it was like you cleansed your mind. So that 40 minutes of a commute was my mind cleansing thing. So I started getting I liked the music. I'm not a musician. I can't sing. I can't do that. I like the beat. I like the music. And it really was refreshing. So I got involved with the music a little bit. And then whenever I used to go to Phoenix, instead of taking my ticket at 3 o'clock, to take the ticket at 7 o'clock, so I would actually go to bhajans and then come back. And then that's when I really wanted to come to bhajans in New York itself. I didn't want to go all the way to Phoenix to just go to bhajans, right? So that's when I came to some at the temple here. But still, that was all just basically, I was feeling good listening to bhajans. I didn't even know why, but I felt good. But I had still refused to read any of the books. So the thing that really changed me, I think, it's just like one of these moments, people have the aha moment. So it was 1992. I was flying from Philadelphia all the way to Phoenix. And as you know, it's a pretty long flight. So I had come prepared with Tom Clancy novels and all these other things that I was going to keep myself busy with. And I know I put them in my backpack. So I sit down in the plane, open up the backpack, and I couldn't find any of the novels. They were all gone, It's not there. And the only book that was there was The Vision of Sai by Rita Bruce. And I was looking at the book and said, oh, boy, this is going to be a long flight because I have no entertainment at all. So because I didn't have any other choice, I started reading the book. And, obviously people have many, many ways that they get attracted, or Swami drags them into his fold. And that book was his instrument for me, because I read that book and I said, okay, the one thing I'm going to do after I read this book, I'm going to become a vegetarian. So I got out of the plane, and my mom's been telling me to be a vegetarian for years. Everybody else in the family is carnivorous. And so I get off the plane, and you know how it is, right? The son's coming home. So mom has this enormous feast planned with 4 or 5 meat dishes, etc. I come off the plane, I said, guess what? From now on, I'm going to be a vegetarian. So nearly floored her, of course, but she was happy, and she said, how long, we'll see how long it's going to take you. So 1993, I became vegetarian, and I have not had any meat now, I guess, for 19 years. So, it's just kind of that moment. At that time, I got very interested in Swami. Then we wanted to find a center close by. At that time, we had moved to Philadelphia. And that, of course, was a story, too. So we've been looking for centers nearby. And, of course, there was no internet. There was no Google. There was no Facebook. None of that stuff at that point, right? So you had to actually dial the phone or punch the numbers in a phone. And so people didn't know where the closest center was. So we did this for about 4 months trying to find a center. Couldn't find the center. And all of a sudden, one Sunday, we get a phone call. And Malati auntie calls, and she goes, I hear you're looking for a center. And he goes, guess what? There's a center in Doylestown, which is literally 3 miles away. And so for several months, we were looking for a center. And then that's the center that we primarily went to. And, it was great for us. It was like a family. It was a very small center, but very, very close. And that's really where my entire introduction to Swami occurred. It was also at that point where, Swami attracts people in very, very different ways. So for me, he attracted me through medicine. And, how did that work out? Well, we were in satsang. We used to have satsang on Sundays, but on Thursday, Malati called us up. She was the center president. She said, my uncle is coming from Puttaparthi, and do you know that they built a new hospital there? Again, remember, this is not the time of the internet, so we have, the news from India to come here takes a long time to come. So I didn't even know they had a hospital or anything. So I went there to listen to his talk. So he talked about the new hospital, super specialty hospital that they built, and that they're doing all this cardiac surgery for free. And I'm like, oh, come on, I need to do this thing for free. And then after the talk, he came to me and he said, oh, doctor, you're obviously a Sai devotee. You're a cardiac surgeon. Let me ask you a favor. A lot of the valves that we need to put in. So valves are, the heart has 4 valves. And that is usually the disease of the poor. And in India, of course, in Puttaparthi, they're doing all of the surgery for poor people, so they didn't have enough valves. And so, now it's much different than it was in 1992, 1993. So he said, we need valves. Can you get us valves? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've been a cardiac surgery attending for 3 months. Where am I going to get access to valves? And then how am I ever going to bring them to India, right? These things are expensive. In the U.S., they're about $5,000 a piece. Maybe I can donate 1, possibly 2, and not rolling in money, and then that's it. So I'm in the office, and we didn't even have thoughts about going to India. My wife, she was coming to India every other year when we had the kids. So she said, I'm going to go to India. Do you want to come to India? And I said, not really. And she said, no, come. I have a friend in Bangalore. And, Bangalore is also where Whitefield is there, so we can always see if we can see Swami. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to go. And then at that time, we had some problems at work. And so my boss basically told me one day, he said, you know what, don't even think about a vacation for the next 6 months. So I said, okay, no vacation. So I didn't even ask him about going to India. And, this kind of life goes on. And one day he came back and he said, you know what, I'm canceling, he was canceling his time off. So he said, if you want, why don't you take this week off? And it just happens to be the week my Sheila was traveling to India. So I told her, hey, listen, I can accompany you to India. Of course, that made great points for me with the wife, right? Because she had to go with 2 children alone. Now I'm going with her, so she thinks I was doing it for her. So it just works out very, very well. And then, I still no contact about valves or anything. And then one day I'm sitting in my office and this valve rep comes in and he says, Doc, I hear you're going to go to India. I go, yeah. He goes, guess what? They changed the model of the valves. So we have older valves that are perfectly fine, But all the doctors who want the new valves in the U.S., when they exchange out the valves, they can't resell the old valves. So he says, I got a garage full of valves that I really don't know what to do with. If you're going to India, can you use them? I said, whoa, okay. And then, of course, if one guy does it, right, the other competitor rep finds out about that, then he's got to match it. So all of a sudden, now I have a big suitcase full of valves. And so that forced me to go to Whitefield. And at that time, we didn't know any of the routines about Swami and stuff like that. I was in the back, and you can see Swami as a small speck of orange all the way in the front. And that's the first time we actually even saw Swami. And I must admit, some people have said, the first time they saw Swami, they got this burst of light. They saw a halo. I actually didn't see anything. It was just so far away. But we said, okay, where are we going to go next? So then I had to go to Patti. And Sheila stayed back in Bangalore because Swami was there in Bangalore. She wasn't going to go to Patti. So at that time, I went to Patti. So you have to understand, the roads were terrible. It took like 5 hours to get there. And for you who have not been there, Patti is literally desert, right? It's in the middle of nowhere. And so you're going there. There's little villages. You see people running around, roosters running around, etc. And then you go up a mountain, you come down a mountain, and then all of a sudden you see this big pink temple. And it's beautiful. It's the hospital. And so we went there. And, if anybody's gone to Patti, you have sevadals, right? The people do incredible work. There's volunteers. They could be professors. They could be CEOs, but they're doing their volunteer work. And I'm convinced that they're put there by Swami just to cut down everybody's egos. Because, for them, they don't know who you are, so they want to treat you like anybody else. So we go there to the gates of the super specialty hospital, and I'm like, well, I'm Dr. Jeevanandam from University of Chicago. I'm from the United States. I've come to see the administrator, and the guy goes, I don't care who you are. You're staying right here. So this goes on for about, 10, 15 minutes. You know how it is. You can't reason with them because they don't know. Then, this is how Swami works, right? All of a sudden, somebody goes in, they talk, and they say, okay, fine. So allows me in. I don't know if people have been to the hospital. I'll show you a picture later, but there's like a little driveway in the front. You come in the front, and the administrator at that time came to me, and he opened up his arms, and he goes, you've come home. And I'm looking at him saying, I don't even know who you are. What do you mean I've come home? And, little do I know that was home. Eventually, about several years later, I asked Swami, I said, can I work in the hospital? And he looked at me, he's never really scolded at me. He grabbed my hand and he said, Baba, that's your hospital. And you can work here anytime you want. That's your hospital. And so that's why when that person said, you've come home, it resonated later. And so interestingly, what he narrated a story to me. He said they were very short on valves and they're not able to do the surgeries they wanted to do. So they would ask Swami during darshan. Because at that time, you were in the veranda. Swami used to come by. You can just ask Swami anything you want. It was like a wonderful time. And Swami would say, don't wait. Somebody from America will come and give you valves. They're like, okay. It's been going on for months. And then, so I came. He goes, I see Swami predicted you would come. Just never told us when. And so I got very involved with them at that point. They wanted me to give a lecture. And I really hadn't thought about giving them a lecture. And I didn't even realize I had brought slides. But when they opened up the briefcase, there were my slides. So I gave them a slide on heart transplants. And then that actually made them invite me for the next cardiovascular symposium. So, looking back, Swami really has a customized individual program for each one of us. I mean, for me, he kind of caught me with music and medicine. Even now, whenever I travel, I don't listen to anything other than bhajans. It just kind of it's much more soothing for me. I know when I came here, we'd gotten late. There was terrible traffic, and I know if I listened to anything else, I'd be burning a hole in my stomach. But I was just listening to instrumental bhajans, saying, okay, whatever Swami wants will happen. He wants me to get there on time. It will be okay. And I got there on time. So, he's kind of grabbed me with music. A lot of personal interactions, but I will admit that after 2006, so then after the final 5 years, I didn't have an interview. We would have short bursts of talking with Swami. He would never completely let me go, but there would be short bursts of talking with Swami. And I actually grew more spiritually in those 5 years than before. Because before, everything was geared towards getting the interview with Swami, Then you would just ask him questions. But you didn't figure it out yourself. Then over the last 5 years, you realize that you had to figure it out yourself. And he, of course, gives you the strength and the guidance to do that. And we should all realize that we need to do that. But he does give you the opportunity and the power to do it. And I think it really, it's been great over the last 5 years. Now, don't get me wrong. It's great to have him make fun of you and tap you in the shoulder and grab your arm and all that. But, he's allowed me to mature and, is really certainly at a deeper level. And, but he would still show those sparks of divinity, right? So we've never really been there during a festival. I don't like to go during a festival because if you go during a festival, then no one works in the hospital. And if I'm going to work in the hospital, then it's kind of, I just feel I should go there when there's no festival. But just so happened once I went there during Shivaratri. And my mom said, oh, you have to do Pada Namaskar for Swami in Shivaratri. That's really, really special. You have to do it. And so I was sitting there. Swami went in his wheelchair. And, there were so many people around Swami. You just couldn't, I was just too embarrassed to ask or just get up and do Pada Namaskar. So Swami was, reversing, going back, and he would just stop there. I was just looking at Swami. And when I was looking at Swami, the only thing I could think about is that my mom said, I got to do Pada Namaskar. How am I going to do this with all these people? Should I just ask Swami? Should I not ask Swami? What do I do? And you know what, Swami, and I could always tell you he could read your minds. He just took his leg and just put it on my foot. And so that was his way of saying, okay, don't get up, but that's the Pada Namaskar. So, very, very small hint, just a little hint, but you knew that he knew, and you knew that he was looking out for your own behalf. So, in practical terms, when we talk about transformation, what does transformation mean? I think the real things that I have found that I have been transformed are not completely. This is not complete, believe me. It's a process. I probably need another 100 lifetimes to get through the process, but at least it's a start. A lot of it is jealousy, right? Swami says you should feel and treat everybody equally, right? Sometimes it's very hard. It's easy to feel compassion towards a homeless person, but can you feel compassion towards Warren Buffett, who's got billions and billions of dollars, right? So it's hard to find compassion towards somebody who's doing better than you. But what Swami says is that everybody has a role. Every single one of us is very important to Swami. Every one of us is important in his eyes. And so it depends on the karma from before. And, you don't even know what's going on in their life, right? In a superficial way, it may seem great, but they may have much more problems than you are. They may be unhappy. Who knows? So basically, the idea of jealousy that just keeps gnawing at you is something that would be great if you could transform. Desires, right? We desire to be a chief, and then you want to be a chairman, and then you want to be a CEO, and you want to have more and more. And I've come to the realization that the more you want, the more headaches you get. Nothing more than headaches. So as Swami has always said, be happy where you are, and let natural things occur. Forgive and forget. This is a very important thing. If you can't forgive and forget, and you hold those things in the back of your mind, all that they will do is give you a lot of mental tension and just give you anxiety, and there's no advantage. Just forget about it and you go on. Swami's always said, see good, do good, be good, right? Because if you're bad, then everything you see in others is going to be bad as well. So accept uncontrollable situations. This is very difficult sometimes, right? There may be weather, a plane's delayed, this happens, that happens. And at the end of the day, if you really figure it out, life goes on, number one. And number two, it's probably for your own good somehow, right? So I fly a lot. If a flight's delayed, yes, you get angry, you get upset, then you also think back and you said, you know what? Maybe Swami didn't want me traveling down that highway at that particular time. Maybe he wants me to go an hour later. Maybe he wants me to go 2 hours later, whatever. And finally, destroying ego. So this is, you can't think that you are doing something. It's all really God's work, and I think that's very important on the pathway of transformation. So, let me see. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is talk about more experiences and now really get into some of the lessons I've learned. So, in 1993 is when I went to Perthi. In 1994, they invited me to come to the second cardiovascular symposium. And it's very interesting. They had it in February, and February is actually, and no one could understand why Swami had it in February. But for us in the U.S., it's actually great because I get to escape the winter, and it's actually a time where there's not that many meetings. So the February has kind of been a very nice time, so I've gone every February. So we got the invitation to come, and I went there to the symposium. This is the first time I've ever gone to Perthi in Prashanti Nilayam. I had gone to the hospital before. So I went to Prashanti Nilayam, and there was this enormous line, and everybody's always said, if you want to see Swami, there's this long line. So I just went to the back of the line. And I was like, oh, how am I ever going to get in? And one of the Sevadals saw my placard, and he said, oh, no, you don't have to stay online. You can just come in here. So he puts me into this area with the doctors, and I'm sitting in the back, not knowing any of the protocols. So Swami comes in and just kind of waves his hand. I didn't even know what he was doing. But I guess, later on you realize when he waves his hand, that's the sign that you should come in for interview. So, everybody got up and went in for the interview. I had no idea what to do. I said, if you wanted me to come for interview, I guess he has to call me by myself. So I'm sitting in the corner. So, he's about ready to close the door. He looks at me. He just looked at me directly. And the next thing I know, one of the students comes by and says, hey, doctor, you have to come back in too. So I go in. So we're in this interview room. And I look around and, talk about luminaries in cardiac surgery. All these people who wrote the books are there. People like Donald Roth. I mean, you wouldn't know these names, but these are guys who have described the first operation, or people who have, been magnificent. They're great doctors. So Swami sits down and he tells everybody, he goes around one by one. He says, well, this person's from here and he's a great doctor, and this person's from there. He's a great doctor. Then he looked at me and he goes, where are you from? I said, Philadelphia, Swami. He goes, yes. He goes, you're a good doctor. And so the first thing that hit me is, oh boy, I have a long way to go. He calls all these people great doctors, and I've been relegated to the good doctor. And he materialized things for everybody, and spent a good amount of time. And then I also realized that he shows that spark of divinity. So he would ask them. These are the guys who wrote the books, right? So you ask these people, about an operation, and you ask somebody, what was the, who did the first bypass? Who used the heart-lung machine first? And they said, oh, it's Dr. Gibbons. And then he said, and who was the patient that he used it on? And what was the name of the mother? And what was this and that? And they're like, whoa, how does he know those answers? And so, again, just that spark, that little spark that Swami would have, just let everybody in the room realize who the real master was. And it wasn't them, and these were the luminaries in cardiac surgery. So, it was a really, really powerful experience. And then we had the whole meeting. And it was very interesting meetings, right? Because whenever we go here to the American Heart meetings, thoracic surgeons, you go for your talk, you go for a little particular talk, and then you go out, you enjoy the town, or you go out exercising, walking, whatever, in San Francisco, beautiful San Francisco or LA. In Perthi, you don't do that. Because if you're not in the talk, they track you down, and Swami will say, how come you're not in the talk? So the only time I've completely attended cardiac symposia is in Puttaparthi. And it's very interesting because I've learned probably the most, because then you're not only focused on the surgery, you're focused on prevention, you're focused on vitamins, you're focused on nutrition, etc. So it certainly gives everybody a very, very broad education. So I was there. The problem there, of course, is that you're 12 hours completely diametrically opposite the time zones in America. Right. So right now when I go and you operate there, you start operating about 7 o'clock in the morning, which is 7 o'clock in the evening. and you're basically operating throughout your sleep period. So if I stop operating, I'm going to go to sleep. So I just they put case after case. You go from room to room, and at about 5 o'clock at that time, when when Swami was here, we used to finish, and then you sit in darshan, and as you're sitting in darshan, it's when you're really falling asleep. So I was like, well, Swami's talking. Why are you falling asleep? It's like, So anyway, in this meeting, we all sit down in a chair, right? And what do you do when you sit down in a chair and it's your sleep time? You're going to sleep. So I'm kind of merrily sleeping. And then all of a sudden, Swami comes up to give the convocation talk. And he starts talking about medicine and all this. And then all of a sudden, I kind of wake up. And this is like 3 o'clock. And of course, Swami wants, remember I told you he wants you to hear certain things? Well, he certainly wanted me to hear this. So he's talking and he says how great doctors are. They're so learned. They've gone through school. They know a tremendous amount of knowledge. They save lives. Then he says, but Swami, he only likes good doctors. So I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? And so then he goes on to describe what he says is a good doctor. He says a good doctor is somebody who's compassionate, who has a lot of patience towards their patients, who listens to them, who cares for them, and who really works with the patient. And then it just dawned on me that, boy, I really need to change my ways. That's Swami's way of making me change my ways. And it's funny, even now, just on Wednesday, I usually see about 3 or 4 new patients, or 6 new patients, and 2 patients needed to come on. So I was seeing 8 new patients. And there was this one patient who kept asking question after question after question. And I'm like, okay, I got time, 3 other meetings, got to get out of here. And the person kept asking questions, and I was getting annoyed, and I knew I was going to do it. And all of a sudden I could hear the voice. Swami says, Swami likes good doctors. And so I said, okay. Sit down and listen to the patient. And, we spent 45 minutes with the patient. And, she was somebody who had gone and seen 4 different doctors and couldn't feel comfortable with anybody. She really needed to have surgery, but she didn't want to have surgery because she just wasn't comfortable. So we just sat down. We talked about her family. We talked about all her fears and everything. And she wrote us a very nice letter the next day. She goes, well, of all the doctors I talked to, thank God I talked to you because now I'm comfortable doing the surgery. So that's Swami, right? Even now I can hear him say, Swami likes good doctors. So, as I said, little excerpt. I was hearing many discourses of the one thing I remember. And, this time it was actually very rewarding. I was back in Parthi. They had put together a compilation of Swami's. They had a disc about the hospital. And in that, they had the compilation of things. And they had that speech, that exact speech. And I really wanted to bring it, but I couldn't, master it out of the DVD. But, I kind of listened to it over and over again. I say, boy, I really have to change my ways. And the thing is, when he talks about you being a good doctor, let me narrate you another story, and believe me, I'm not completely there yet, right? So we take a lot of donor calls. So, the nurse may call you and say, okay, we have this donor. And do you want the organ for the donor for your recipient? And a lot of times they may call me, and the donor may be, a young person, but for whatever reason, their heart's not working. So I remember once distinctly getting called. This always occurs in the middle of the night. So about 1 o'clock in the morning, they call me and they say, okay, we have this donor, and the 3 other programs in your region don't want it because the heart's no good. Do you want to even consider it? And I said, okay, I will consider it if it becomes good, then we're getting it and not anybody else, right? Because we're still competitive. You want to do more transplants than somebody else, and why am I giving this heart to somebody else? So I said, if I'm going to do the work all night long, then this is our organ. I goes, okay, fine. So from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning, every half an hour we get called, and we manipulate this and we manipulate that. And at 7 o'clock, that donor organ looks great. And so I call up and I said, okay, it looks great now, so I'm going to call my recipient. And they said, no, you can't do that because the procurement person that you had the agreement with, she's off service now. So we had a new person. They ran a whole list, and now all the people who had turned down the heart want the heart now. And of course, you go ballistic and you say, well, hey, come on, we had a deal. I worked hard. I got this. It's for one of my patients. They said, no, we have to run the list again. And so we did this thing. So I'm like, pissed off a little bit. You want to make sure that your numbers are good, that you're doing all these transplants. And I have sick patients, but feeling bad, couldn't do the transplant. So about 3 days later, we have a meeting and we have like a get-together of all transplant surgeons in like Chicago. We're having a dinner, and usually I'm always hanging around with the surgeons, right? I'm a surgeon. But just so happened I came in late, so I had to sit with the cardiologist. One of the cardiologists says, you know what happened 3 days ago? She goes, a real miracle happened. I'm like, okay, we got to listen to this, right? It's a miracle. So she says, they had a very, very sick patient who really didn't have any options and who was doing really, really poorly, and they were kind of administering the last rites. And they said there was no heart that was available at all. And we had gotten a call for a heart that was terrible, and we thought that it wasn't going to work at all, so we were going to let this guy die. And she goes, you know what, at 7 o'clock they called back, and that heart was really good, and we transplanted this guy, and this guy is doing fantastically well. And so I'm thinking to myself, I, in my little, small, focused world, thinking that, my patient, my program doesn't get the heart. But Swami looks at it from a universal world, right? So he definitely used me as an instrument to help that person. And, things like that really open up your eyes and say, don't think about yourself. Don't be selfish. If you're going to help, you help without any strings attached, because there's a universal world out there that we have no idea about. And that was the amazing thing about Swami, because he really could, from top down, know about everything that everybody else was doing. So that also taught me that I have a long way to go, right? Because I should never have questioned it. I should have just said, great, somebody else got the organ, and Swami meant for that person to get the organ. But it took me a long time to figure that out. So I do have a long way to go, but at least I'm on the right path. Let's see. I think the other lesson that I learned there is that we are all instruments of Swami, right? He will use us and give us the karma, give us the good karma to do good for others. And we all need to really, really use that opportunity. And talking about doing good work and good karma for people, this is the picture of the Puttaparthi Hospital. You can see it's kind of this very glowing pink color. The Whitefield Hospital is 2.5 times bigger. It's in Whitefield, all that stuff. But that looks like an institution, and this to me was always temple. This is home. And so when that doctor with open arms said, "You've come home," I have worked here a fair bit. People say the most amazing thing here is that all the care is free. And I would say it's great that the care is free, but if you found somebody who's really, really rich, they could probably also give free care. But what this place has that no other place in the world can have, even no matter how much money you spend, is unbelievable unconditional love, right? Because the people there are working for Swami. They're working for Swami's grace. And if you just go around, now, of course, the generations have changed. But, in the 90s, Swami needed to find X-ray technologists, echo technologists, perfusionists, nurses. And how did he get those people? Well, he went to his college, and during Darshan line said, you're going to be a perfusionist, you're going to be X-ray technician, you're going to be a nurse, you're going to do this. And they all went to Delhi to get trained, and they came back and they did it. And I tell you, they're the smartest, best people in the world. And, they're very innovative, they're creative, and of course they're all doing it for Swami. So there's a certain love in that hospital that can never be emulated in any other hospital, no matter how much money you pour into that hospital. When you talk about love in the hospital, there's a great DVD that I got a hold of. This hospital was literally built in 6 months, like 5.5 months. Swami, in his birthday, said that they'll have another hospital. They'll do a first case in 1 year. Well, the hospital didn't start building until May. And, amazing stories of how the hospital got built, and you had 24/7 work throughout to make it happen. And it has operating room theaters. We do cardiac and thoracic surgery there, And the amazing thing about it is the collaboration, because when you come here, you have the cardiologists who need to generate their own money, or the surgeon need to generate their own money. There's no money there involved at all. So everybody kind of works together to take care of patients. So it's really kind of an amazing hospital. I've worked, Swami's allowed me to work in that hospital. I work about a week every February and a week every September in the hospital. And in the beginning, it was all about how many cases we did. So I know with Swami, you're not supposed to have jealousy and ego and all that stuff, but you would walk in and they said, oh, this doctor just came here and he went back to Texas and he did 40 cases. How many cases are you going to do? You got to go, God, I got to do 41, right? Got to do more. You can't do less. And so at that time, their doctors were in flux. There really wasn't any permanent doctors. So we would come in there with our own teams and do cases. And so, again, one of these things that really, really hits home, I had come there with my assistant, and it was about 2 o'clock, and all of a sudden the nurse said, okay, we got to stop today because Swami's giving a discourse, and so we want to be there by 6. And I said, well, I got 4 hours. I could do 2 cases in 4 hours. And they said, no, we all want to go hear a discourse. Being kind of, at that time, an arrogant, brash person, I said, come on, I could do this with my hands tied behind my back. You just get out of my way. I'll show you how to do these cases. And you know what? I won't do 2. I'll do 1. Guarantee you'll be there for his talk, right? And so once you know it, every little thing went wrong, right? So we didn't finish till 10 o'clock at night. And the patient did okay, but it was just one of those things that every single thing went wrong. So next day in morning darshan, Swami comes around, he looks at me, and he goes, not half as fast, but double as long. So he knows about every little thing that occurs. And you know what? Even to this day, when you look at a case and you say, oh yeah, no problem, I'll take care of it, that always comes in the back of my mind saying, well, you are not taking care of it. If anybody's taking care of it, it's Swami. So you basically say, I'll do my best, and we'll hope for the best, and with God's grace, everything will work. But you don't say anything brash and arrogant. So I just want to show that I have worked in the hospital, but I've probably got 100 times more value than that hospital has ever gotten from me. When Swami's always said, you take 1 step towards me, and God will take 10 steps towards you. Well, it certainly happened for me in the hospital, because I have learned so much through incidences like this and, interactions with Swami and stuff through the hospital. So what I would say is you do the things for the right reasons, and then you don't worry about the consequences. Because don't think about getting praise. Don't think about saying, everybody's saying, oh, that was great. Just don't worry about the praise, but you do what you think is right. And if you do what you think is right, Swami will always support whatever you do. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this incident. So this was later on. This was like around 1995. And this was back in Chicago. And in Chicago, a patient came to me, and he needed an aortic valve. And the thing was, he needed an aortic valve about 5 years ago, and he was a Sai Baba devotee. And so the doctors would say, you need an aortic valve, you can't leave the hospital. And he says, no, I'm going to go home. And so he probably had a record amount of AMAs, or against medical advice letters, that said he would not do this. But he would ask Swami, and Swami would say, no, wait. And so he was confused. He didn't know whether it meant W-A-I-T or W-E-I-G-H-T, that he was too large and he had to lose weight. So, he kept going on, and they knew Malati, who was the center president. So Malati said, Dr. Jeevanandam's a cardiac surgeon. Why don't you go see Dr. Jeevanandam? So they came into my office, and I said, Sai Ram. He said, so nice hearing a Sai Ram from a doctor. And so we talked about his valve, and he said, I understand I need the valve, but until Swami says to have it done, I'm not going to have it done. I said, that's absolutely perfectly fine. I understand. And you go ask Swami. So that night, or I guess that day, his mother-in-law was in Puttaparthi, and during darshan, she had a letter for Swami. So Swami came to her, took the letter, and she says, yes, have Jeevanandam do the operation. So he came back to me and he said, yeah, Swami said you can do the operation, so I want to do the operation, and I want to do it next Thursday. And I said, why next Thursday? He goes, that's a good day, it's Thursday, and I want to get this done over and quick before Swami changes his mind. And so it just so happened like my parents were coming in, and I had promised them I was going to take them to the temple, etc. But, we changed the date, so we kept it for Thursday. Now, the interesting thing was before that time, we also take a picture of the coronary arteries. And 5 years ago, he had a little bit of blockage in the coronary arteries, but nothing significant. And then we repeated it, and we found a very, very tight blockage in one of the coronary arteries. So if he had his valve done 5 years ago, then he would need another operation to take care of his coronary arteries. By Swami making him wait and safely protecting him during his wait, he was able to have both procedures done at the same time. So, we felt good about that. And so it came to the day of the surgery, and, he came to me and he said, I have one request. I know Swami materialized some vibhuti for you. I want you to put the vibhuti on my tongue just before surgery. And so you have to understand, if you put something on somebody's tongue that's of powder in the operating room, people look at you strangely. So, but I said I promised. I took the vibhuti out. I said, Swami, I'm going to put this on him and make sure no one sees it. So everybody's looking at me. I put it on. No one said a word. So I said, okay, fine. So then, of course, you got the monkey mind, right? So I'm thinking to myself, Swami, if you really want everything to go well, you got to give me a sign. And whatever sign it is, you got to give me a sign. So then I go out and I scrub. So usually, we're scrubbing, we're cleaning our hands, and it's about 3 minutes. There's a timer there. You got to wait 3 minutes anyway. The nurses clock you on how long you take. So you got 3 minutes of meditation time. So I usually pray to Swami, kind of have my own conversation with Swami. So I'm talking to Swami. I say, Swami, I just want to make sure this guy goes well, because if he doesn't go well, the whole Sai community's. So, please make sure he goes well, and, show me a sign. So I'm scrubbing, and as I'm thinking to Swami, the head of neurosurgery comes to me, and he goes, Val, I got something to give you. And I'm like, oh, God, he's sort of breaking my meditation time. This is violation of my space here. So I said, yeah, Raj, what's up? He said, about a year ago, somebody came from India, and they gave me a picture. And it was a picture of Sai Baba. And I just put it on my table thinking I had to give it to you when I saw you, but it was never in my pocket for me to give it to you. And he said, this morning I woke up, I opened up the window, there was a gust of air, and the only thing that flew out of my table was this picture of Sai Baba. It fell on the floor. So I'm going to give you the picture because I think Sai Baba wants you to have the picture. So that was the picture. So I'm thinking to myself, if that's the sign, then that's the sign. And actually, I even carry it with me now, because inside, it says, may the divine grace and blessings ever be with you in all your noble deeds. So that was the sign. And of course, his case went very, very well, and everything was good. So the next day, I come in, and this person who I operate on is a very stark Sai Baba devotee. So the next day I come in, and he's in restraints, right? He's been all tied down, all 4 legs are tied, 4 limbs are tied down. And I was like, what's going on? And because usually what we do is we keep the patient with the breathing tube in overnight, and then the next day morning we take the breathing tube out. And she says, well, he's hallucinating, doc. That's why I had to tie him down. I said, well, what do you mean he's hallucinating? What's he saying? He goes, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, he said that somebody came into his room wearing an orange robe and pulled the breathing tube out. Now, we know he's hallucinating because no one ever does that, and that's why we tied him down. And so one of his fears was the breathing tube, that he would wake up with the breathing tube. And when I talked to him, he said, as soon as he woke up and the breathing tube was uncomfortable, that Swami came and he just took the tube out. And needless to say, of course, he's done very, very well, and he wasn't hallucinating. But those were some of the particular patients, and it's his trust in Swami, right? It's his faith. because so many doctors told him he needs to have surgery, and yet he did not have surgery till Swami told him to have surgery. And I have seen over and over again is that faith that actually gets people through life's challenges much more than anything else. And I see a lot of patients, and you may have an 85-year-old who needs 2 valves, and it's a very complex operation, and you go to them and you say there's an 80% chance of living, there's a 20% chance you may not live. And if that person says, you know what, doc, you believe in God? I said, yeah. He goes, you know what, if it's God's will I live, I'm going to live, and I'm just going to make plans for my vacation. And you know what? He'll work through you and I'll do fine, and if I don't do fine, then it's just my time. And you know what? Those patients always do great. The person who doesn't do well is the 45-year-old who should do great, who's like, okay, what is your mortality rate? Your mortality rate is 5.2%. I'm going to go to somebody who's 5.1%. You know, what is this complication, that complication? You know what? They have every single complication. So there is the power of prayer, the power of faith, and I see it on a constant basis. I mean, another example I'll give you is a patient who was a pathologist at the Whitefield Hospital. And it was very similar, right? He had an aortic valve problem, and Swami kept telling him, no surgery, no surgery. And so he'd come on darshan line every day, and he would ask Swami when he had a chance, and Swami would say, no surgery. Then one day, in, I think, 2000, he took him aside, and he said, I'm going to tell you something. In 1 year, there'll be a hospital in Whitefield, and the best doctors in the world are going to come to this hospital, and you will have your aortic valve done with a valve that no one's ever used in India. And now go sit down. So spent the whole, year, and you'd come in and out of the hospital, and people would say, you have to get operated on, and he would say, no, Swami said no. And he didn't even ask Swami, because he said, I'm not going to ask Swami until this hospital comes up. So that was the Whitefield Hospital. So the Whitefield Hospital came up, and Swami went to Dr. Venugopal, who was really the dean of cardiac surgeons in India, and asked Venugopal to bring 3 other people that he trusted to do work in the hospital. So he brought 2 other people that were working with him in Delhi, and he asked me to come from the United States. So the 4 of us, we had 4 operating rooms there. So Swami wanted all 4 operating rooms to go on at the same time when the hospital was open. So that's why he needed 4 surgeons for the 4 operating rooms. So we operated on him. We operated there. And then this gentleman, it was about Wednesday, and he was still in darshan line. So Swami came to him and he said, I told you there'd be a new hospital. There's a new hospital. Why are you sitting down? Go ahead and have your surgery. So the guy comes to have surgery, and, just before I left, we had got these, what we call cryopreserved veins. So their veins actually come from a human, like a human transplant, and they get frozen, and you can actually defrost them. They're very, very expensive. They're very rare. They're hard to get. But they were particular sizes, and they were going to expire. And so the rep came to me and he says, listen, they're too small for Americans. Maybe you take them to India and you can use them. And this guy was pretty small, so we were going to put a homograft in him. And so that's when he related this story about how he was going to get a valve that Swami said no one else in India ever got. That was the first homograph valve ever done in India. And I told him, and then he said, you know what, doctor? The only thing I want is I want to be able to say Sai Ram at the end of the case. So you may think that's simple, right? But Sai Ram means he's not had a stroke, that he's off the ventilator. So a lot of good things have to happen before he says Sai Ram. So Swami, at that time, that was the 1 week when we were all doing the initial cases. And there were people from all over the world who would come and visit Swami. So Swami would come and make ICU rounds. And every time in ICU rounds, we would be there. And he would always ask, where are you from? Where are you from? And always ask me where I'm from. So by this time, I've answered that about 20 times. So I'm thinking, okay, why is Swami doing this? Little did I know later, is I found out that every single time he would bring somebody else, like the health minister of France or, very, very big luminaries, and they didn't know who I was or anybody was. So by asking who you are, he's actually giving you an opportunity to kind of talk about yourself in front of these people. So that's what he was doing that for. See, I'd never understood that. I'm like kind of annoyed, saying, why can't you ask me something else? But so anyway, so he comes around to ask about us, and he always used to make 1 round of the ICU, see everybody, and go. So he makes the 1 round of the ICU, and he goes out the door. Then he turns around, he comes back, and he stands right in front of this other pathologist who had the valve. And just at that time, they took the breathing tube out. And he was able to say Sai Ram with Sai Ram right there. So that's how Swami does these little things, and how you wait, and then you get what you really want if you just wait long enough. This is the Whitefield Hospital. So this Whitefield Hospital, this is more like an institution, right? This is 2.5 times Puttaparthi. This was built in 2001. We did the first cases there. And so Swami put on some incredible restrictions, right? He said, we want you to do 50 cases in a week. You're not allowed to tell anybody that the hospital is open. And that you have to do the 50th case, so when the Prime Minister comes on Friday and inaugurates it, you already done 50 cases. So, okay, how do you operate in a hospital if people don't know the hospital exists? But only Swami, of course, makes that happen, right? So, very interestingly, about 8 years before this, he had told somebody that he was going to build a hospital in this area, which is right in Whitefield, near Vrindavan, and said that the first person who's going to be operated on is going to be a carpenter. So we didn't know any of this, right? So this was, we were supposed to do the first case 7 o'clock on Monday morning, because that's the Nalaneram, right, the good time. And so this is 8 o'clock on Sunday, and we don't have a patient. So we're like trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get a patient? So one of the, we're all sitting down, and one of the guys comes in, and he says, you know what, I have a friend whose brother had a stent placed in the heart, and he had to sell everything that he had for the stent. And then the stent closed, and now he doesn't have any money, and they refuse to put another stent in. And so he's basically dying, or he can't do anything, he can't work, etc., because he's having a lot of pain, doesn't have money for the stent. And so we're like, this could be our first patient. So this guy got treated like royalty, right? We sent a car out to his house. We picked him up. We brought him back in. We opened up the cath lab at 12 o'clock at midnight to look at his angio. And he was the first case. And guess what? He was a carpenter, just like Swami had predicted 8 years ago. And needless to say, of course, things went well. So this taught me a lot about Swami and ego suppression, right? Because you're one of 4 doctors, you're doing this. At that time, we were able to go right in front of line, and you could talk to Swami about the cases, etc. And so Dr. Venugopal, magnificent person, a real public servant. And he's the one who actually did the first cases in Parthi, did the first cases here. So Swami said, I need you to do a talk for the inauguration. And so Dr. Venugopal doesn't like the private sector, doesn't like government, etc. He's just all about the patient, which is fantastic. So he said, okay, I want to make a talk, and I want to do a PowerPoint presentation. Remember, this is 2001, so PowerPoint is just kind of coming up and stuff. So, he had a PowerPoint presentation done where we talk about Swami, we talk about the water project, we talk about this, and then we talk about the government and the government hospitals and how poorly they're run, and then coming right back to talk about Swami again. And so Swami just came to Venugopal the next day, and he said, presentation no good, change it. Okay, so Swami never seen the presentation, we didn't give it to him or anything. This is all spontaneous. And so Venugopal, he's probably the only person I know who said, come on, but I don't want to do that presentation anyway. So we were kind of a little bit nervous, but, he's the boss. We got to follow the boss. And so, we had the presentation. So before, he was giving this talk, and I kid you not, ran it about 10 times, right? You run it on the computer, you run every single screen, you make sure all the pictures come in, make sure everything, the animations and everything works, everything's working great. He starts giving the talk. We get the music a little bit about Swami, and there's a great picture of Swami in the universe and all that. And then as he's about to talk about the government, you get the blue screen on a Windows computer, right? The blue screen of death. It's just like gone. So we're like Control-Alt-deleting everything possible. It's not coming up at all. So we eventually just pull the plug and put it back in. Now, as you know, when you put it back in, it's got to go through the boot sequence, and then it's asked for the password, then it opens up, then you got to open up PowerPoint. Well, this time it just opened up right to PowerPoint at the end of when we talked about the government and just when we talk about Swami again. So that portion where we talked about the government was all taken out. And won't you know it, because eventually that prime minister is the one who appointed Dr. Venugopal as director of AIMS and as his personal physician, and they had a relationship. So that relationship would never have occurred if he kind of trashed the government, right? And so Swami takes care of you whether you like it or not for your own benefit. So, again, many events, and the lessons are really that keep coming back over and over again, is that it's not you. It's Swami, it's God. There's a much bigger world out there. It's a much bigger universe. You're a small part of that universe. For Swami, everybody's a very important part of that universe. And that's when he says you have to treat everybody as equal. He certainly treats everybody as an equal. And it's kind of hard for us sometimes, but we need to do that as well. So Swami's given me a lot of personal attention over the years. And he still gives me, as I said, personal attention in different ways. But this was one of the interviews. And, again, with Swami, everything is a story, right? So at that time, no one's allowed, this was after like those terrorist attacks or whatever, no one's allowed to bring cameras in, you're all going through body scanners, etc. The doctors seemed to be able to kind of skirt around, but although I would try to skirt around, they would always make me go through the detector, and the guys coming with me said, just say your staff, sir, just say your staff, you don't have to go through the detector. So I had a video camera because I had a really interesting case in the hospital, and so I came for afternoon darshan. And it's usually on a Wednesday. This was on a Wednesday. So Swami never invites me in for an interview on a Wednesday. Yeah, I think he just never wanted to disrupt the weekly routine. So I take the camera in, kind of skirt around security, go in and sit down with the camera. And Swami actually asked for an interview, for me to come in for an interview that time. So it's extremely surprising. It's never even expected it. And so I had the camera, and so I was trying to give the camera to somebody else, saying, well, I'm going to go in. Why don't you just take care of the camera? And he's like, I don't want to take care of this camera. You take it with you. Why don't you just go take a video of the interview? And so I'm thinking to myself, should I go? Should I ask Swami for permission? What happens if he says no? Should I just take it? And it's Swami, right? So if I take it and it doesn't come out, then we could always say that's Swami's will. That's why it didn't come out. So I took it, and I took the video. And, each one of these interviews is different. Sometimes they're very practical interviews. Sometimes they go into spirituality. But always, always very, very loving. This interview was very interesting because he knew that I was videotaping it. And so there was a 30-minute discourse on food. Okay? I actually, after that interview, stopped eating rice, and I've lost about 20 pounds. So for me personally, it was great. But he makes it into a video that I could share with other people because it's about a very, very simple concept of food. He really focuses on the diabetics, but it's really applicable to us all. And very interesting to really enjoy the moments. We should have enjoyed that time when Swami was just giving us darshan, because after that it was the wheelchair, it was the surgeries, then it was the car, and we would always say, Swami, just make yourself better. And there was a reason for what he did, and that was slow withdrawal, because if he withdraw really quickly, we'd all be devastated. And so anyway, so I was inside, and I started taking the video. And as I started taking the video, I'm thinking to myself, okay, does Swami really want me to take the video, not take the video? Should I ask him for permission or whatever? And Swami, as I said, always could read my mind. So I'm thinking to myself whether I should take it or not, and you'll see Swami's answer right here.
Season is coming. Take it.
So that's Swami's answer, right? So he knew what I was doing. He wanted you guys to be able to see the video and everybody else. So, and you could see a couple of things. So he's always he's laughing because the mother asked why they hasn't had a grandchild yet, and that's why he said it's coming, it's coming. That's why he's smiling. So he's always smiling in the interview time. It's really the time when. Well, I've seen different interviews. Sometimes we were there. I've also been at an interview when the Chief Justice of India was there, too. It's a little bit more formal at that time. This was kind of like his fun, personal interview. I'll just run it again.
Season is coming.
He's coming. A little mischievous smile.
Take it.
So then my next question was, okay, here I have God in front of me, and I could go and sit down in front of him and touch his feet, etc. And I'm taking him behind a camcorder, right? So I'm looking at him through to a viewfinder as opposed to actually being able to be very close to him. And is that something that I should do? Should I? So actually, Swami again reads my mind, and he actually has one of the other students who's there to take the video, and he says, "Come and sit down next to me." And afterwards, I was just thinking, okay, what am I going to do with the video? And then after the interview would come out, people said, wow, think about how great it is for the other people in the room that they could see themselves with Swami on the video. See, I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm just thinking about myself. But I then realized that how great it was for everybody else, and those people, obviously made tapes for, and they still talk to me about the special of that thing. And again, that was the effect on me. I was being selfish. I was thinking about myself. Should I, be next to Swami, etc. But think of how I've helped other people. But then even more, the fact that you guys are able to enjoy it, because some of you might have seen Swami in personal interviews. But in general, when you see him, when he's out there for discourses or for bhajan, he's not really smiling that much, and he's not that engaged, and he's very serious, and maybe he's just doing the tal with his hand, but he's not really that engaged. But you can see he's very engaged, and he's actually quite funny. So these are a couple of life lessons of Swami, right? So how Swami's a great director, right? So he sets this all up. So he has females, he has males. The scenario is that one of the children is a new onset diabetic, so he's using that to answer questions that the mother has about diabetes. Swami will tell her to talk less, and I think that's a very important lesson for us all, right? Swami's always said, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it. Well, also says talk less, because he says silence is golden. So here's one of Swami's lessons.
No, less.
No, he's going to smile right at you.
No, less. Thinking also very bad.
Thinking is also very bad.
Mentally, very bad. Very.
So that's the root cause of disease: worry, hurry, and curry.
Very.
Now he'll get animated. Watch this.
Very.
So if you think about it, worry is mental anxiety, right? And then hurrying is just the stress of life. And then the curry is the fact that you have to eat properly to solve all these things. So, this is the type, and then Swami would actually go on to talk about what fruits are good and what, he said the best way he said South Indians like rice and North Indians like chapatis. So the best thing you can do is feed a South Indian chapati and a North Indian rice, so they both eat less, which is really the best way to control weight. So then Swami says he's been 108 pounds for 60 years, and he's really happy with just ragi. So ragi is like a millet seed. It's like a porridge, and that's what he eats today, and he said that's what I eat tomorrow and tomorrow. And you'll say that food is not important, that the head is what is important.
Healthy body. She said,
78 years. Food control.
When 60 years earlier,
108 pounds for the last 60 years.
Pounds. That is good. Diet control. My morning ragi malt.
Ragi malt आप खाते हैं?
60 years. Ragi malt खाता है.
There is Swami's diet is ragi malt in the morning.
that है नेक्स्ट टुमारो कमिंग इतना अच्छा होगा बहुत अच्छा बहुत गुड होगा
इसको भी दूँ दादी मोड़
अभी ये रोता है तो पानी नहीं आता रोता है 50
But, important thing that he said, right, is that food's not important. It's the head that's important. So it's very, very important to eat properly for the body, but don't live to eat. So this is actually very interesting. So this is a cardiologist who received a ring from Swami many years ago. And he absolutely refused to remove it. Because he said, Swami, put on my finger, I'm not going to remove it. So he's gone through a lot of washing and everything. So there was a big gap in the back because the gold had just worn off. And he had put some tape to put it together. So Swami looked at him and he said, what's with this ring? So he took the ring, and you'll see he'll blow it on his hand 3 times. Give it back to him, all repaired. And what was amazing about it, when he showed us the ring, and unfortunately doesn't come here, that emerald had a little chip on it. And after the Swami blew it, that chip was still there, but the ring was whole. So you'll see that here. Asking him why didn't he have it fixed in Australia. There. I want this lady, I want to show it to this lady, see what she says.
Which color is this?
Green. Maybe my glasses. I don't see very well at all.
It was completely repaired in that defect.
I have space. Right?
I always say, do you like? And there's a smaller room on the side where he gives the personal or private interviews. So he told me to go in. So you'll see that. He'll say Jeevan Jao. So Jiva Jao. So it's very interesting, right? So my name is Valluvan. That's my given name. My dad's name is Jeevanandam. That was his given name. When we came to America, we just assumed his given name as our last name. So in essence, he was like Jeevanandam. But Swami would never call me Valluvan. He always call me Jeevanandam. So I don't know whether it was in deference to my father or the last name or whatever. He would just call me Jiva, just as life. And so you'll see he'll say Jiva Jao. So just go inside. So I go inside, and when I go inside, I'm thinking, okay, now Sheila, my wife, my mom, everybody's going to want to watch this interview. So I want to situate it such that we can videotape inside, right? So there's a little windowsill. So I put the camera on the windowsill, and you'll see a chair there. That's where Swami always sits. So I'd anticipated sitting in Swami's right side, and I would sit on the ground. And this video was then all panned to take Swami and me sitting down, and everything would be great. We would videotape the whole thing, right? So Swami comes in, very interesting. So Swami always talks to me in Hindi, but he would always talk to me in Hindi. I'd have to say, Swami, I don't know Hindi. Then he'd speak to me in English or in Tamil. Not in Tamil, usually in English. That was the first time. Listen very closely when he comes in. Now the problem is, Swami doesn't want you guys to be completely clear. That's why the fans are all running. That's why there's a rumble in the back. When he comes in, listen to him, because there you go, there's the rumble. Listen to him, because he will speak in the most New York accent you could ever hear. And he will say, go sit in the chair. And go sit in the chair. And that's the only time I actually had Swami talk to me in that accent, but just listen to it. And what ends up happening is that he actually makes me go sit in the chair as opposed to sitting down on the ground. And then the most amazing thing is that he comes and he sits right next to me. So we're all just sitting like buddies talking. And then I asked him about his health. And then he will tell me for about a little while about his leg and the fact that one leg is shorter than the other leg, and that, I asked him, why can't he cure himself? And he says, Banguru, he says, everybody comes to me with their problems, and I have to take on their problems. So if I take on their problems, unless I take on their problems, they're not going to get better. So as long as people pray to me to take care of themselves, then I'm going to have these problems. And then he will go on and he'll say, how's mother? You'll hear that. And then after how's mother, then I've cut it all out, because by the time the fan and everything is pretty hard, and he talks about my mother and everything else. So you'll see all that. So this Jiva Jao, go inside. So now you'll see me doing the setup. That's his chair. So I put the video, I'm going to sit there, try to make sure that I'm in the picture. Now listen, Swami's going to come in.
Sit on the chair.
You hear that?
How are you, sir?
How are you, sir? So instead of having you get dice, that's all.
But sometimes we say, like his neighbor.
He's just talking to me about his leg and the fact that he doesn't feel any pain, although he's limping, that for him, pain doesn't exist. That's what he's saying. There's thousands of devotees asking him for the leg pains. And he'll just say, how's mother? So that's it when he starts talking about mom. So actually one of the questions I had, Swami gives materializations. So he's actually materialized this ring for me. So this has a whole story too, right? So I was sitting there reading a book, and somebody had a diamond ring. And so I'm just thinking, that must be a person really, really special to have a diamond ring. And so I was there, and Swami said, doctor, what do you want? And I said, Swami, I want your grace. And of course he said, you always ask for grace. You always have my grace. I'm in you. I'm around you. And he's just tapping me on my head. And he says, what do you want? And then he materialized this ring for me, which was the diamond ring, just like the one that was in the book. And so, being a surgeon, if I had to take that ring out and put it in the pocket every single time, you knew it was going to get lost, right? So I made it into a chain. And so I always have been able to keep it as a chain with me. Then the next year I go, and so think about how many millions of people have gone through Puttaparthi. He looks at me and he goes, where's your ring? And I said, Swami, I put it here. And he says, so it's close to the heart to a heart surgeon. And then, lo and behold, what does he do? He materializes another ring. So that's the Navaratinam ring. So I had that hooked on to this as well. And even now I wear it. And every once in a while, if I really need to pray to Swami for something particular, I could always grab onto it. And it's always right here near my heart. And interestingly, many times when I've needed to pay attention to something, it has pulled on me or given me a little shock, or, I just kind of say, okay, well, just kind of scratch it. And it kind of wakes me up at a particular time when things might be actually important that I have to pay attention to it. So there's an interesting story with that Navaratanam ring too. So what ended up happening is that he made me the ring, and then we went to our friend's house, and the friend's wife said, oh, that's the new model, that's square, I have like a diamond-shaped one. And she says, that one of the stones had fallen out. And so he said, Rajiv, that's her husband. She said, Rajiv, you always know Swami, why don't you go and get it fixed? And Rajiv says, well, I'm not going to get it fixed. He gave it to you, so you should ask Swami to get it fixed. And then he said, why don't you just go to the jeweler to get it fixed? And she says, no, Swami's got to fix it. So this is a conversation they were having when I was there. They were kind of arguing a little bit, kind of a friendly banter. And so the next day, they have an interview with Swami. And so she brings the ring, and Swami goes directly to her, and she goes, "Why do you guys fight about the ring? You just ask me and I'll fix it." So he took it and he just fixed it for her. So that's Swami, it's like even the smallest conversation you have, he knows where it's occurring, and he's going to take care of it. So anyway, so he also materialized this bracelet. And it's very interesting, as he materialized the bracelet, he would always grab my chain and say, "Bangaru, this is permanent." And then he would materialize a bracelet for me, right? So I had the bracelet. So I had the bracelet for several years, and then all of a sudden, distinctively remember, we always spend New Year's in Phoenix with my parents. So New Year's Eve, I had it, and it was like a day before New Year's Eve. I know I went to sleep with it. I felt somebody pulling it off, and the next day morning it was gone. And obviously nothing else happened in the house. It wasn't like an intruder, and we searched high and low, couldn't, just was disappeared. And I actually asked Swami in the interview, and he said, yes, I have it. He says, it's not good for you, so Swami took it back. So Swami actually will give you things, but then if he thinks it's not good for you, then he'll also take it back. So nothing is permanent. But it's interesting that he did say that the necklace was more permanent, probably because he was telling me that hopefully I won't lose that, but I'm definitely going to lose this. People used to look at that. Even my children used to, they say, "Boy, this is like bling in the south side of Chicago," And, I used to walk home from work and stuff, and maybe Swami said, "Hey, you walk around with this thing." So he took it back. So Swami always looks out for your good. So we'll talk about the kind of a real quick thing about the Mahasamadhi. Okay, so Swami's final message, right? Well, Swami's always said his message is his life. And I think the events around March or April of last year were very, very poignant about his message. And the one thing that I got the most out of that was expectations. We only get disappointed in life because we have expectations. If you don't have expectations, you don't get disappointed. And this was the cardiovascular symposium in 2010. And at that time, I had seen Swami every 6 months. He wasn't giving personal interviews, but I was be able to ask him questions and stuff like that. So I was talking about, Swami, how about the cardiovascular symposium for next year? Not realizing that would be the last time we would have it. So, you always have expectations. So I think a very, very important lesson is that the less expectations you have, the less disappointments you'll have in life. And, if Swami had said, "I'm going to die when I'm 85, and he died when he's 85, then people would have accepted it. It's just that when he said he's going to die when he's 96, and he went early, we all expected him to live to 96. So, I think it's a big lesson. Don't always assume expectations. So, Swami was he was God, but he came with a human form. And then he went to the hospital. And in that hospital, he had a cardiac arrest. And the next 27 days of him being in the hospital is his other message, and this message of love. Because if he had just died that day, then people would have been disbelieving, there would have been mass hysteria. But instead of just leaving, he basically said, "Okay, I'm going to go, but these next 27 days are for your healing, so you can start healing, praying, you can do anything that you want." The people that he really loved were those doctors in Patti, right? So if they hadn't done everything possible for Swami, people would have said, "Well, you guys are no good, you didn't do everything for Swami, you didn't bring in this doctor, that doctor." So he allowed everything to happen to him for those 27 days. So we can all, I think, rationalize that we have done everything possible for Swami. So that's really his powerful, powerful message of love. So as I said, his final message was full of love. And, even in that video, and he always says that he took his pain upon himself. He suffered during those 27 days. We did everything possible to keep him alive. In the back of our mind, also saying if Swami really wanted to do it, he'd just take care of it himself. And he always kept his word. Now, of course, this is Swami's last picture. When we talk about keeping his word, I'll leave you this one little incident. So in 2006, we had our final interview with Swami. And my father, at the end of the interview, as we were going out the door, turned to Swami and he said, "Is it true?" And Swami said, yes, it's true. And so I didn't understand what Swami was saying was true. And I asked my dad. He goes, no, it's just between me and Swami. I'm not going to tell you. So, we went back to Phoenix, and we were in Phoenix, and then we were leaving for New Year's. So I was going back to Chicago, and my dad at the airport said, I'm going to tell you what Swami tells me. He goes, I have a feeling I need to tell you what Swami tells me. And I said, well, why are you telling me this at the airport? I mean, there's other places you can tell me. And he said, I had a dream where Swami's dead, and he's floating in the air, and you're right underneath him as, the procession is going on. And I said, oh, come on, that's kind of a morbid thing to think about, right? I'm not thinking about Swami's death right now, and that's still 15 years down the line. Now, it's interesting because my dad died about a month later. He had a sudden bilateral stroke. So that's kind of like the last thing my dad actually told me in person. And so, this went on, and it just so happened with the incredible amount of circumstances. I was not to be in Patti at the time that Swami actually passed away, but I was there. And that night, the final night when Swami was at least the body was there. We had it in the bhajan hall, and then at 5 o'clock in the morning, people woke me up and they said, you know what, this is the final time you're going to be able to spend with Swami. You want to come and spend time with Swami. So we were there with Swami in the bhajan hall till 7. And then they had to move him to Kulvant Hall in the front. And remember, Swami was in a completely glass casket. And so we lifted Swami up. And they didn't have enough students at that time, so I was there. And so just as my dad's dream, Swami was above me, floating above me as we were taking him to Kulvant Hall. So when we said Swami keeps his word, that was a dream that I was totally disassociated with, but somehow whatever he says does come true. And I think that's like a super, super powerful message. And that's always been his message of life. So anyway, thank you very much. I know we kept you on a precious Sunday, kind of used up your time. And, the person who always takes the most advantage of this is me, because this allows me to kind of rekindle with Swami, get refreshed. And I really, really want to thank you all for listening to my experiences. Jai Sai Ram.